Now in this section we'll try to understand some advanced DHCP concept like DHCP relay agent. Now DHCP relay agent is a feature which will allow you to assign the IP address to the clients which are on a remote network. Like there might be scenarios where, let's say you have a LAN and you got some computers in the LAN. This is my LAN, and in this LAN we have some virtual LANs also. We are dividing them into VLANs, VLAN 10, VLAN 20 and VLAN 30. And maybe you have a DHCP server. Let's say there is a DHCP server and DHCP server is on the VLAN 30. Now probably if these particular users are in the VLAN 30, the DHCP server will be able to communicate within the VLAN 30, right? Because the client will send the broadcast and the broadcast will be restricted only within the VLAN 30. Now you may want some of the clients who are on the remote VLAN, like VLAN 10, VLAN 20, we have some clients and we want these clients also should get an IP address from the DHCP server which is on the VLAN 30, or it can be any other VLAN. Now in these scenarios, the one option is we can go with a separate DHCP server for each and every VLAN, but that is something not really scalable. So in this kind of scenarios, what we can do is we can go with some advanced DHCP option called IP helper address, or in normal terminology we call it as a relay agent. Okay, so that's something what we are going to see in this scenario. Now there are a couple of scenarios, like one scenario where you can have a DHCP server on a VLAN 10 and you have a clients on a different VLAN, because if the client sends a broadcast, it will be within this VLAN, it will never go to DHCP server. Or you may run into a scenario where you have a DHCP client which is on a remote branch office, maybe on a remote location, and you have a DHCP server somewhere on a remote branch office. Let's say this is in Hyderabad and this is in Bangalore, and I have a client in Bangalore who wants to take the IP address from the DHCP server which is in Hyderabad branch office. Because maybe I cannot go with a separate DHCP server in each and every location, and I want to go with a centralized DHCP for all the branches. Now how we can make this possible? So to make this possible, what we can do is we can use a configuration called IP helper address, where whenever there is a client on a remote network sends a broadcast, so it's going to send a broadcast request. Now we can configure the router to receive the broadcast request and send that broadcast request to the DHCP as a unicast message. And that is what we call as relay agent or helper address. Now we need to go to this interface and we need to simply configure a command saying that to the router, saying that hello router, whenever you receive any DHCP messages or DHCP discover messages, probably if anyone wants an IP address, please forward that particular broadcast packet as a unicast packet to the specific DHCP server wherever it is as a unicast. Now as we have a routing enabled, so probably this router knows exactly, we are going to tell to the router that where is a DHCP server, saying that the IP helper address is 10.001. Actually it is 10.001, not 2, it's 1. So that is what DHCP relay agent will do. The DHCP relay agent, it's going to receive the broadcast and it's going to send that broadcast request as a unicast request to the DHCP server wherever it is. It can be on the remote LAN, it can be on the remote VLAN, it doesn't matter. And that is something what we are going to see in this lab scenario. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue with my previous lab, and I'm going to add one more LAN here which is on a different network, maybe 172 network, whatever it is. I'm going to add one router here. Maybe I'll use one router here, router 2, and this router 2 is going to connect to my LAN. So I'm going to do the connection here on F0 by 0, and I'm going to connect this router to F0 by 1 here. So let's say I got the connection here. So almost the same way, or I can use a serial cable as per the diagram. It doesn't matter which cable we are using. So in my lab workbook, I'm using serial 0 by 0 interface. It doesn't matter. So the only difference is in my lab, I'm using F0 by 1 here, F0 by 1 here. Okay. So the first thing, we are getting into the router 1 and we'll do the basic configuration on the router 1. The router 1 is already a DHCP server. Okay, and I'm going to assign the IP address on the router 1 saying that it is 10.001 with a default subnet mask. And then I'm going to save the configurations. Now similar way, I'll go to router 2. On the router 2, we need to do the basic configuration and mostly the IP addressing. The first step, that's my router 2 interface F0 by 0, and the IP address is 172.16.1.100 255.255.255.0, and then no shutdown command, and interface F0 by 1. Let's say I'm using 10.002 as per my diagram. And now you should see the reachability between 10.001 and 2. Now I got a client here. Now I want to ensure that this particular DHCP client should get the IP address from the DHCP server. Now to make that possible, the first thing, we need to have a reachability between these two networks, because if there is no reachability, then how you can expect the router 3 or router 2 to send the unicast message. So what we are going to do is we are going to configure some routing protocol to ensure that we have reachability. Anyway, it's a directly connected network. You have reachability here. It works fine, but I'm just configuring here. So in my scenario, router 3 and router 2 and router 1 both are directly connected to each other, so it works fine. So let's go to router 1 and then I'll configure EHRP and then network 10.network and 1.network. Okay, so now my requirement is now as you have a reachability between them based on the routings, so just ensure that you have some reachability between the two different networks, advertise the networks by using some routing protocol. Now the next thing is we need a client, and this client should be assigned the IP address within the range of 172.16. We need to create a DHCP pool for 172.16.network, right? Because already in the DHCP, in the previous lab, we have configured a range of addresses for 192.168.1.network, and there is a pool name called CCIE. Now we are going to create another pool, let's say CCNP 172 something, which is going to assign for these clients. So let us go to the DHCP and create some pool. IP DHCP pool, let's say CCIE 172. I'll give the name as 172, and then we are going to define the network. What's the network they should use? Just to differentiate, I'm using 172.network, and then we need to say default router is 172.16.1.100. The gateway is this one, 1.100, and then probably if you want to provide the DNS server information, I'm using the same DNS server information. And if you want to exclude some addresses, we can exclude. As of now, I'm not excluding them. Now once we create the DHCP pool, the next thing we need to do is we need to configure the IP helper address. Now IP helper address, now we need to tell to the router that if it receives any broadcast request, DHCP request from the LAN interface, DHCP messages, it has to send it to the router 1 as a unicast. And to make that possible, we need to go to router 2. This is router 2 in my lab scenario here. This is router 2. We need to go to the interface where you are expected to receive the broadcast. We need to say IP helper address, and then we need to write the IP address of the DHCP server. Now in my scenario, the IP address of the DHCP server is 10.001. So let's go to router 2. Router 2, I need to say interface F0 by 0. I'm going to say IP helper address, and then we need to type the IP address of the DHCP server. So whenever it receives any broadcast request, it's going to say forward it to 10.001. Now I think I'm done with the configurations. Let me go and verify what are the configuration I should expect. Now the first thing, we configure the routing protocol already, and we have configured some pool as well, and then the DHCP server. Now let's go to the computer on this client for verifying the things. So I'll go to this client and I'll say obtain the IP address automatically from DHCP. Now I can see it has sent a request and it has assigned the IP address of 172.network based on the 172 pool which we created. And now the client here is able to still get the IP address from the DHCP server, which is not within the same LAN, because normally DHCP server and clients communicate with each other based on the broadcast messages. But here, when it receives any broadcast message, it is going to send it to this router 1 as a unicast message to the DHCP server. And that's something additional configuration is required if you want to if you want to ensure that you have a client on a different VLAN or different network and you have a one common DHCP for all. Now I got one more lab documented in the workbook. If you just go with that one, probably one lab scenario I have used different networks, but you may come across a scenario where you can also have the DHCP server on a different VLAN. Now I have some clients here on the VLAN 20, and these clients are supposed to get the IP address from the DHCP server, and how to make that possible. And the 192.168.2. network we decided. Now mostly all the configuration will go the same way. Now here I'm using a router as a DHCP server, so I'm disabling the IP routing because I'm not using it as a router. It's just like a normal computer, and then the default gateway is this one, VLAN 100. So I created SVIs. For VLAN 10 it is 192.168.1.100. For VLAN 20 it is 192.168.2.100. And we created a pool, and this pool is for 192.168.1. network, and based on this pool all the clients can get an IP address. But that is not what I want. I want the remote users, clients on the other side, also should get the IP address from the DHCP server, which is in the VLAN 10, and I have a clients on VLAN 20. Now to make that possible, we need to go to this VLAN 20 interface, the gateway here, to send as a unicast packet on to the DHCP server, and that's what we are doing here. So the configuration goes similar as we did on the routers, but you may come across a scenario where in the production networks you have multiple VLANs and you are using some multi-layer switch to do inter-VLAN routing. Now in those kind of scenarios we need to go with this one. Now the configuration, the creating the pool, it's going to be the same. So I suggest you to go through with that lab as well. It's just a slight variation of the lab for the same DHCP and the DHCP relay agent configurations.